I don't know if I know every one of you, Dr. Cimpiano, and probably this was my dream. This, as everybody's telling me, this is your dream, this place here, and I suppose so. And so I'm continuously in a dream, and I have wonderful people with me, and new people coming, new wonderful people coming from other parts of the world. And so again, I know most of you, and some of you who might be new here or new to me or knowing me. I've been through a lot, and I've known some wonderful, inspiring people, and they've taught me a lot. And here is a man right now that we're going to introduce that has taught probably a lot more. He comes from such a huge country, and he is so welcome. He, his wife, his beautiful wife and baby, and he's traveled many a mile, has authored many a paper and book, so forth, a professor of English, as Diane said, and he is going to help us here at the Home Center. He's going to help me, and he's helping us at Access Healthcare with his brilliance, his ability to put things together, content, and so forth. Help us here, and you'll see us on podcasts. Hopefully, very soon we're going to have a lot of those things happening. But he's someone who is in the know about many subjects. He speaks beautiful, many languages. You tell them how many languages you speak. I'm sure he speaks Sanskrit. And he's written a book here, a beautiful book that people will love to read, and I encourage you to do so. So, without further ado, I introduce Makarand. Please come and give us all your knowledge and all your experiences and all this relationship stuff.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Diane. Thank you, Maria Ji. It's really wonderful to be here. Thank you all for coming. It's a really hot day out there. So it does take a bit of energy to move your body and bring it here. So the topic, I want to plunge straight into it, is relationships, and I call it the yoga of relationships. So what does this mean? So we're going to get into that almost immediately, but I thought that we might begin with that poem, which is a part of an earlier collection of mine called Confluence. I think it was published in 2007. So is there anyone here who has a beautiful reading voice who would like to volunteer to read the poem? Thank you, ma'am. Yeah, please. You can stand up if you like and come right here, because we are recording this and this will be on YouTube. So you can stand right here if you don't mind.
Okay.
Yes.
Sure. Relationship from Confluence by Marker R. Paranjape. To live is to be related by ties of blood or emotion, by inheritance or choice, accident or force. Each is linked to the other. How fragile a thing this is, like holding sharp glass in bare hands. One wrong twist and bleeding pain results. So hold the contradictions in your palms gently, without reaction, like a warm, throbbing bird, sharp-beaked but too young to fly, and before your eyes, the complication is resolved, like snowflakes melting on contact, leaving but a cleansing drop or two of tears.
Thank you, thank you. Thank you for that rendering, thank you. So, this sort of serves as a takeoff point or a point of departure, if you will, for our discussion today. I mean, the suggestion in the poem is that, and you can correct me, that none of us is free of relationships. Is there anybody here who can say, I have no relationships at all? I'm not talking about the relationship status that we put on Facebook, but But is there anyone here who hasn't grappled with the challenge, the turmoil, the travail, possibly the trauma of relationships? Please raise your hand. So we're all in the same boat, right? And I think Diane said something very beautiful, so I'm going to refer to that if you don't mind. You know, she said that think about every relationship, especially difficult ones, you know, as if it were a contract, and in a way you're in charge. But if you look at it from a slightly different point of view, you know, from a spiritual point of view, then it's a covenant and not a contract. So you can get out of a contract, but can you get out of a covenant? And here's the thing, what the second thing she said, which was really important, because she said the most important relationship is with yourself. So if it's another person, you can tear it up. I agree. I mean, why should you be, you know, forever condemned or doomed in a toxic relationship which is sucking your lifeblood, let's say, okay? But with yourself, can you tear up that contract? No, it's a covenant. So you've got to begin with yourself, and you have to live with yourself, you know, till that point when you can actually say, you know, I'm moving on, and you're ready to relinquish this body. But we can come back to that later. You know, the reason I brought up some of this is because I want to say at the outset, I'm not a relationship therapist, okay? I'm a writer, I'm a poet, I'm a person struggling, you know, I'm a seeker. I want to find the truth. I want to find that hack, you know, just as all of us have been struggling to all our lives, you know. And I've got a lot of debris as well when I look back, not so much regrets, but really the deep sense of, should I say, both learning and compassion at the pain I might have caused others and the pain I caused myself as well. But here's the point. The point, now I'm coming to the crux of the point, which is that, you know, for a long time I didn't understand that, you know, relationships are actually yoga. So, you know, when we do yoga, we think we're doing some postures, right? And if you go into it deeper, if you read Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, then you know it's the postures, the physical aspect called asana is only one of the 8 steps. There's all kinds of other things, you know. Before you get to the asana, there's purification, there are the do's and the don'ts, like our 10 commandments. Every tradition has them, because the foundation of a good life is an ethical foundation. So if you're continuously, you know, hurting others, being violent, or hurting even the environment. We just had the World Environment Day on, I think, the 5th of June. So the do's and the don'ts are important because, you know, the 10 commandments, one of them is thou shalt not kill. And it doesn't say whom to kill, whom not to kill. Generally, they're saying don't kill, basically. So, and, you know, don't, so ahimsa, in the traditions I come from, ahimsa means, you know, non-injury is a foundation. Now, of course, you have to eat an apple, and, you know, if you pluck it before its time, you've killed an apple. But I guess the idea is the renouncing of the intent to hurt others, because life feeds on life. And, you know, Gandhi went through this too, when people said you're eating dates and you're taking life. But so life is feeding on life, but the important thing is not to have that attitude of violence, to have the attitude of compassion. And in the native traditions of this land, I'm told, you have to take permission from the animal you're about to slay. You know, when they give up their life, I mean, in the Native American traditions, you know, you fire the arrow or whatever, and you have to touch that animal and say, I'm going to be eating you and I want your forgiveness. So I'm just saying that in yoga, the asanas, or the physical aspect, is just one. There are the do's and the don'ts, the foundation of an ethical life, and then there's breathing, there's self-study, there's, you know, concentration, etc. So when we think about yoga, we often think only about postures, but it's a package deal. It's actually a way of life. But here's the thing, the word yoga comes from the same root that the English word yoke comes from, right? And it means to join. So every form of yoga, whatever form of yoga you do, will have some joining or relationship involved. So yoga, all yoga is actually about relationships in one form or another. And when we are doing the Ashtanga yoga, which is called the Raj Yoga or the royal path, you know, the yoga, I mean, people may say this, that, you know, you're connecting with the divine, for example. So there is a connection, there is a joining, there is your ordinary self, and then there is God, let's say. But let's say you don't believe in God. For example, the Buddhists don't believe in God as we understand it. That's all right. You have to relate with yourself, isn't it? So fundamentally, all forms of yoga are actually about relationship. But that's not the same thing as the yoga of relationships, which I sort of came upon much later in my life, because as Diane suggested, I realized that all these relationships that I had been through, including the ones that I had very little choice, at least ostensibly, with my parents, I was born in a family, etc. But then I realized that I kind of chose this family. I didn't know it, you know. That goes into other realms, we needn't go there, but I think we have a tremendous degree of choice, which we don't fully recognize. But I began to see that every relationship was actually an opportunity to learn. It had been given to me, or I had been put there for a specific purpose, to learn certain things. So that's why I wanted to say, to dial back to where I began, that you can, you know, tear up your contract and you can get out of a difficult relationship. But it's my experience, and you can correct me, in your next relationship, you're going to come to that exact same spot again, with a different set of circumstances, with a different person, but you'll be offered similar choices. And again, you'll be, as I said, given an opportunity either to rise above that problem or to go underneath it. You know, because most relationship problems can never be solved at the level at which that problem erupts. I can tell you that, because, you know, Diane said, you go through your contract and you say, did I sign up for this? No. Am I being treated well? No. Am I doing everything I'm supposed to be doing? Yes. Then why are we failing? And I can assure you, in, well, no percentages here, but in 7, 8, 9 times out of 10, if you ask the other person, they'll say the exact same thing. They'll say, did I sign up for this? No. Am I doing everything I'm supposed to? Yes. You know, have I mistreated the other person deliberately? No. Then why are we going wrong? Where is the disjunct? Where is the disconnect? That's why I feel it can never be solved at that level, because at that level, maybe both are right. If you go a bit higher, you'll have to leave that self of yours there and your significant other and rise up and look at it from above, and you may see a different view. Or you can't hack it, you go below and then you hack it in some other ways, and it's just a very messy departure. But I feel that, you know, you come back to that juncture, and again you have to make certain choices, certain adjustments, and I'm not saying always stick it out till the end. That's not at all what I'm saying. But similar learning opportunities present themselves. So it's like, you know, you come back to that same circle or those same crossroads again. And that's why I'm saying that you can shortchange a particular relationship, but the covenant with yourself, you know, you can't shortchange. And this is where I want to come to this other book of mine, Identity's Last Secret, which took so many years in writing. And maybe we can have another session I'm told Diana runs a book club as well. But the only reason I brought it up is in 2017 I wrote this poem, and much later I've written this book. And I want to mention one little thing towards the end of this book, which is this kind of legend or myth of Shiva and his beloved consort, Parvati. And I call it a kind of modern tantra, and all tantras, are actually dialogues. So they're all about relationships. They're a dialogue between Shiva and Parvati, and sometimes it is Parvati who asks the questions, and sometimes she's the teacher and Shiva is the one asking questions, right? So in this instance, Parvati is asking the questions, and the questions are, this is the way the dialogue unfolds. I'm going to present it to you very briefly, very succinctly. So Shiva, as the myth goes, is supposed to have a garland of skulls. So his wife Parvati says, sweetheart, what are these skulls doing around your neck, And so Shiva has many forms. So one of his forms, he's very wild in one form, he can't be contained. In other forms, he's okay, but otherwise he's got a snake and all sorts of stuff. And all of this, of course, is symbolic, So he says, I hesitate to answer your question because you may not like the answer, you may be hurt. So she said, no, bring it on, like we really know each other and we've got no secrets from each other, right? And he said, okay, just because you insist. So he says, those are the skulls of all my previous beloveds. And she's totally shocked. She said, what? What's going on here, And so it goes on like that, and he says, okay, this is getting a little difficult, let's not go there. So she says, okay, but it keeps rankling her, and after several months she comes back to him and says, no, you have to tell me the secret, identity's last secret. Like, how is it that, all these women come and go, but you remain? What's going on? So he says to her, this is something I've been dying to tell you, and I feel perhaps at last now you're ready to, learn the secret of secrets, identity's last secret. So she says, yeah, tell me, how is it that, you have all these, previous sort of skeletons in your cupboard, skulls in your cupboard. So he says, all of those were only you in other forms. So I've only loved you. So for a moment, she's very flattered. So she thinks, wow, he's only loved me. And every time, whatever happened to me, he's kept that memento. And he's got all these garlands of all my own different forms. So imagine how much he loves me. He can't do without me, right? Because the garland is also a kind of symbol of love, In India, you can actually, traditionally, you can marry anybody you love. If it's mutual, you just exchange a garland, and the stars and the earth are witness. You don't need a priest. You don't need any ritual. So it's the soul to the soul. We can come back to that later. But then a few more months elapse, and then she says, there's something not quite right here. And she comes back and she says, my darling, how is it that I have to change so many bodies, but you remain as you are? What's special about you? And then he says, well, now you're ready for that secret of secrets, okay? And then they go on like that. But I won't tell you the entire story, otherwise you'll never buy the book, right? But it ends beautifully on that, Shivaratri, that is the night of Shiva. And that's the night, it's the eternal night, as it were, when, as the myth goes, they unite forever. How? What Shiva does is he vacates a part of his body and he says, come on in, and now we will never be parted. Okay? So there's actually a form in India which is really worshipped in temples. I'm not making it up. it's called the Ardha Nari Ishvara, which is the Lord, half of whose form is the goddess. So it's an androgynous deity, okay? And in fact, the symbol of that form, is actually the eternal union of the masculine and the feminine, the yin and the yang that you mentioned, and that's also a form, of the phallus and the yoni that is actually worshipped, okay? But we can leave that out for a moment. And Indians are very inventive. You might know that by now, right? They're not going to stay still, they keep thinking. So you might say that Shiva and Parvati lived happily, eternally, ever after, as most of our rom-coms end, but you never know what happened afterwards, right? Because you want to end it there. And if you're students of literature, it's usually, love and death go hand in hand. Romeo and Juliet, for instance, and so on and so forth. And even in the Islamic tradition, you have Majnu and Layla. So, this "and they lived happily ever after" usually never happens. So there are these very smart theorists in Kashmir. They began to think about it, and they said, you know what, there was this beautiful form made up of Shiva and Parvati, and that form, is supposed to last through that eternal night of Shiva, the night of love, that night of love that followed the night of longing, right? And then they said, but they said, let's think about what happened to that half vacated male body and female body, And then they theorized about it. Then they said, that masculine body was also longing for its masculinity after having given up half of itself for the beloved, and that feminine body was actually longing for that supreme power of the feminine, saying, I ceded half my body, actually. So he said that after the completion, after that fulfillment, after that, you might say, that omega point, that lack, that sense of deprivation, even if it's very small, that still persists, and another cycle starts up. You see? So here's where I'm now going to wind up, okay? So what I want to say by way of the yoga of relationships is that when any two entities come together, they create a third entity, and I call that your relationship body. So when you're in love, when it's the initial days, when you can't think of anything except, the object of your adoration, right? Both partners, they sacrifice so much, they build this beautiful relationship body. They're constantly nurturing it, right? Like watering a beautiful plant till it flowers and has lovely fruit and so forth. And then over the years, things happen. Maybe a child comes along, and then you have very little time for each other. Maybe there's not that much physical intimacy, and you begin to see that very healthy relationship body. And remember, when you nurtured the relationship body, your own individual self was starving because you put so much of it there, and that's sort of withered and skinny on that side, and here you've got this wonderfully robust and, in the pink of health, relationship body which you're nurturing. And then you realize after 5 years, 10 years, my goodness, I starved myself for this relationship body, and look at me, I'm a skeletal wreck now, And so you start reclaiming that individual body, okay? And in the process, sometimes the relationship body is now withering. It's getting old, there are wrinkles, the gray hairs start popping up, whatever. And after a while, the relationship body is a wreck. There's nothing left there, you see? So, what is the yoga of relationships? The yoga of relationship is to find that balance where you're not starving to death or to whatever, that terrible word, divorce, or whatever word, breakup you want to use. It is so very painful. You don't want to go that far with that relationship body, but you're not ignoring that individual body as well in the process through continuous tending to others and sacrificing, till you wear yourself to the bone. But where are the rewards? Where is the appreciation? Where is the acceptance? Where is the endorsement? Where is that uplifting feeling you used to have? Even that adoring look, like as soon as you walked into the door, the other person's face used to light up. And now you don't even talk. There's nothing to talk about. What's going on? So you can't let it go that far, and you can't let this individual body of yours also essentially starve, to the point that it needs to be rescued and put into rehab. So I want to end by saying that, J. Krishnamurti, said that relationships are so important because they hold a mirror to who you are. See, when you look at yourself in the mirror, the mirror may or may not tell you the truth, because it all depends on, how you look at the mirror. The mirror may be frosted over, it may be old. Sometimes you don't like what you see, you break the mirror itself. But the relationship tells you truths about yourself which are at times really unpalatable. It's a great mirror, it's a great learning. And I think that the yoga of relationships essentially means to embrace the evolutionary possibility of a relationship. And in Oroville, it's this wonderful experiment, and sometimes not so wonderful, because like all noble experiments, it's probably also failing. But they have a different form of they don't call it a marriage or a contract, but they basically have their own commitment ceremony. And the foundation of that is that we will promise, or we will commit ourselves to contributing to each other's spiritual growth. And when we stop doing that, we will move on. We will let each other go. We will not be a shackle. We will not be, should I say, a prisoner, of either the legal contract or whatever binding promises we've made, but we will release each other with love and with affection. So let me end there. Thank you so much for your attention. Thank you for coming here. Thank you.